Wrapping lines are notational, but like some of these are genuinely awful. To understand the wrapping line, you only need to know these three things. In this video, what I wanted to cover is wrapping lines. What I understand wrapping lines to be, the way I like to use them. I'm going to apply them to a gesture so that you can see. If you feel confused at all, I'm going to go and give you 3 exercises that I think are especially useful for building up a little bit of comfort of making wrapping lines. What I have here is a gesture laid in. This is a great reference from Studio Graphic that has red tape, right, to help you actually see more literally. I think part of the problem with the wrapping lines is that they're an abstract concept. They don't exist. They're notational. There's something to help our drawings early on read with a sense of 3D. But in and of themselves, they're not there, right? So something like this helps me make that, or I hope it helps make the concept feel more grounded, something that you can grasp. I'm going to start with a little bit of a description. So wrapping lines, for me, really can be 2 things. And we're primarily in this video talking about the first of those 2. So wrapping lines are notational, right? They're ellipses that note in a gesture drawing for economy or for speed or brevity, for some kind of 3D orientation. As ellipses, they're related to cylinders. It is a shorthanded notation for the direction in space of a cylinder. Because at a stage like this, we probably don't want to build up complete perspectively sound cylinders. On the other end, right? So something that we're not talking about, but so you can have the other end of this. Another definition for wrapping lines would be what are called surfacing lines or surface contours. They're charting the topography of surface. And that's very much like what you'd see in the red tape there. So in the red tape, you could see how there's little bumps, depressions, pushes, pulls. That's charting the entire topography of the surface, muscle, bone, everything. Still a wrapping line. It's still kind of developing the circumference in space of a form, but it's a much more finished quality to it. So you can think of wrapping lines as existing on this spectrum. They are introduced early, peppered in to give you that notational element to your gesture, and then they can later on be reintroduced to give you that slow investigative analysis of the entire surface. If I have a gesture set up, which would, you could do the gesture however you want. It could be something that emphasizes rhythm. Here I did something more on shape, so you could get a better sense of the solidity of a form moving, however you like. So 3 steps to how it could be used. First, I think of wrapping lines as being one of 2 things. They can be seen, and they're all related to a cylinder. They can be seen above or below. That's it. So you only have to focus at this stage on 2 things. Or you could rename that away and toward, or over and under. It doesn't matter. There's 2 different directions. So let's say A is away, just because I already have an A there, leads us to away. So that's going away in space, right? And then the other option would be I'm below. So I'm below this. That's the B. So away and below, or whatever you connect with there in terms of something that is, memorable. So that's it. And you would bring that same question to your drawing. Is the part that I'm looking at going away, or am I below it, right? Is it coming toward or away, over, under? Again, whatever is easy for you to think. If I stick with away, right, so this one, then think of this. If you want to show this angle, this 3D angle of away, the ellipse always points down. So kind of think of that emphasis so it's easier to connect with. When you're below, the ellipse will always point up to your form. Right? So think arrow down, arrow up. So those are the only 2 options, right? The third, or let's say C, is a modifying option. And it would be how much? How much am I away or below or over or under? And that has to do with the quality of ellipse. I can have an ellipse that is narrow or slightly more opened, right? And you can gradually bring that closer and closer to being a full circle. And so this, if I'm looking at options for A, right, these would be variations on the degree to which I'm above. And so what I'm doing here is I'm not changing, or at least I'm not trying to change the width on this ellipse. This, in other words, this I'm calling the width, that's called the major axes. And the major axes won't change because I don't want the form to get bigger or smaller. To modify degree, I'm only changing the minor axes. I'm opening this up. That brings us to our biggest technical challenge. That's the hardest thing for people being me. To understand the wrapping line, you only need to know these three things in practice, right? But where it can get really complicated is in maintaining that nice looking ellipse. Because if we look at the drawing, you can already get a sense of, oh yeah, that arm goes away, the forearm goes even more so, the leg comes towards, we could see that, especially with the red tape. So before we do these over the figure, let's go through 3 exercises, 3 things that you could do if you want to practice your ellipses. Now, I would recommend doing these on a sketchbook page. The sketchbook page will help keep from feeling like it needs to be a finished work or something like that. And what I'd recommend is, take the confines of the page and develop these exercises within. So let's say this is, an 8.5 by 11 page. Well, one thing you could do with this is, develop a little right angle up in your corner, any corner, could be top left, top right, vary it every time you do this exercise. And then from this corner, establish wherever you have put your emphasis, whatever corner of the sketchbook page you want to use. I'll fill in some radial lines or spokes, like you're thinking of this as the hub of a wheel. And then after this, what I'll do is start to work on different qualities of ellipses. So I'm thinking of different leans and I'm thinking of different degrees. So if I start here, maybe I'll start with something that is like this, right? So that's my ellipse that I'm going to start. And then I'm going to develop progressively smaller ellipses of that same tilt or that same lean and degree down the funnel. So you could keep, if you want, you could draw in that major axes to get your tilt, and then I'll just keep doing that. Now, as I do these, one thing that may help is I do ghosting. Ghosting would be that I slowly get comfortable with that mark, and then I incrementally add more and more pressure the more confident I am. I don't think you have to just do like the one line accurate, that's it. That seems stressful and too machine-like. So feel your way in, right? And just practice. And don't worry about these needing to be perfect. It's just to build muscle memory. That's all, right? You're just trying to develop muscle memory, whether you're drawing from your shoulder or your wrist, if it's in a smaller sketchbook, and just crank out a bunch to warm up. Maybe you want to start with that major axis here. So I'm going to try to lean it a little bit more and go this way. And then same thing, right? So I tried a different ellipse. Can I keep that consistent all the way down? What about something that's more open, like this near circle ellipse? Ellipses are all just circles in perspective. And then you could be critical and you can come back and say, all right, well, I did less ghosting on that one, but I got more wobblies. I got more wobbly ellipses. The double check would be, come back. How well did I keep these peaks in that circle on this, consistent parallel axes all the way back? Let's see if we can even push that broader circle. Maybe I just go full circle on this one and then progressively bring that back. Now, what I find with my own drawing is I have a tendency to be better with things that angle towards the right than towards the left. Let's try a really narrow one. And so what's the benefit of knowing that? Well, you just know what you need to work on. And by no means do these need to be perfect, because when we bring them back into the drawing, for wrapping lines at the stage of gesture, you're really just going to use 2 or 3 per part. But like some of these are genuinely awful, in terms of ellipses. So it's just a matter of feeling out where your weak areas are, practicing, getting comfortable, trying to have fun, doing something that's less stressful than it would be to kind of develop out a whole drawing. So that could be exercise 1. Exercise 2. Maybe we do another frame. If this is a sketchbook page, it's 8.5 by 11. Maybe I could do a couple of these, top and bottom per page. And then I'll do some S curves, right, or some C curves. And then inside of this, I'll do, well, a lot of these were that angle to the right, so I'm going to try angle to the left. Instead of having that consistent funnel, right, so I kind of get overly comfortable with doing those after a while, the S curve broken into the frame or breaking up the frame here gives me more of an unexpected quality or an ebb and a flow, that it starts to approach more of an organic quality, right, that we would want to know and aim for when doing our figures. So here I'm doing the same thing. I come back and double check, but I've kind of gone small, big, bigger, and then starts to narrow, taper, and then maybe I'll try ghosting at first, and then, after that, back to seeing if I could do one line. Let's try even more angled, since I know I'm challenged with things that lean towards the left, and do this. Some of those went a little too far, got a little messy. Can I do this direction? And then maybe just to counter it, maybe let's just do this all circles. I don't enjoy doing, the exercise that would be creating the plane in perspective and then, marking the ellipse and adding the ellipse to it. I like things that are more organic. I've never been really good at drawing cars or machines. So this appeals to me a little bit more than, doing the super perspective breakdown of things. All right, one more exercise, and then we'll apply these to the figure. The third exercise I like to do is, because it brings us very close to the figure, it would just be to set up some blobs. Just have some fun, do some weird, bizarre, blobby shapes that feel kind of organic and natural or weird, and then, or like lava lampy. And then for each, see if you can identify a main area of center. Let's say this one could be here, and it goes this way. You could even do two if you want. So those are my centers in my blobby forms. And then I'm going to try to keep my ellipses based on that center, but describe the form as that center line turns. It's an evolution of this in the sense that we are keeping that organic thread going, but removing it from the rigid frame. So I'm going to follow this center line first this way, and kind of see how it's turning away. And I'm slowly starting to bend these in space as well. And then this goes that way. Here on this side, maybe it goes this way. I'm trying to draw through though. So I'm trying to visualize that entire ellipse. And maybe it turns because it's pinching over on itself. And then it slowly starts to come back and out at this end. And then here's another one. Maybe that one's just kind of consistently going the same way the whole time. I think these are fun, mindless activities that you can do as a warm-up in your sketches. And I don't think you need to do a ton before feeling ready to do, your wrapping lines. But those would be my three. And then if we bring them back over here, you can, hopefully get a sense for your basic feeling of the lean. So for example, here's how I'm visualizing the head, right? So I'm seeing the head as above or going away, and I see it at that angle. So that's how I'm interpreting the head as a perspective object in space when I look at it. Now, what is, again, the utility of the wrapping line? It's notational, because I don't want to do this early. So I'm just going to take this and feed it into my shape. But look how immediately this, if I follow through with it, as a whole shape or form, we're starting to pick up on the prior exercises. Think of the head not as a head, but as that organic frame. You can even do a third use of wrapping line, that my teacher, John Watkiss, would use. If you're not familiar with that, I've posted a video of his lecture, and you could see this where I picked this up. But he would even create rendered drawings that were built from the accumulation of these, right? That they build up enough on the form that they develop a three-dimensional kind of value-based rendering. And I'm going to go through and point out each of these, how I'm seeing these, and then we'll add the wrapping lines. For me, the neck goes away, right? So I'm relating it to the movements of the spine, but even more so than the head. So that direction. Okay, so I'm going to do wrapping lines there. So that gives a little bit more of a push forward on the head. And what is that? What is the neck? Well, it's just this, right? It's just the tapering quality. Rib cage, I'm going to show this way. So think of the whole rib cage pelvis form that I have. It's just one of your blobs. Here's a center line. So I'm just, that's all I'm thinking about. Now this, and I think in a normal gesture where I'm doing my rhythmic lines, if you followed some of the prior videos, my 16 rhythmic lines to get that gesture, I would only probably do, one or two, maybe 2 or 3 wrapping lines per part, per arm, per leg, per, pelvis, just to get a sound foundation for how I think it's moving in space, away or towards. But for this one, since it's more shape-based and I'm really trying to push the understanding of what the wrapping lines are, I want to give a little bit more. We're doing more of a buildup. So that will be my pelvis. I think, in other words, let's try to be more clear. For me, the pelvis is going this way, and that's partly because of how the spine at bottom kicks it back. So it has this surface. And then I see the rib cage going the opposite way. So the rib cage is leaning back this way. So what is a wrapping line? It's notational. That is derived. It's noting that, or it's the summary, or it's the edited version of this for the stage in the drawing. So it's the appropriate usage of an ellipse for this stage in the drawing. Arm, upper arm, goes this way. So I'm just creating these ellipses down the funnel. And then even more so, where it kind of kicks back a little bit more into the forearm there. All right, then for this arm, same. But hopefully you can see, if you compare it to the earlier stage of the drawing where we had just the shape-based lay-in, that they do contribute quite a significant feel of space and form without investing a lot, right? Without having to do a lot more in like building boxes, creating corners. The leg as a shape here, right? We could see this starting to move out. And now I'm just letting that taper down and into the knee. And you could see how eventually this would turn easily into a nice cylinder. And then the lower leg again here this way. Let's be clear. For me, the leg is visualized after I work through my 3 steps, A, B, and C, as a cylinder moving in this direction at that 3D angle. So instead of drawing that, I just had my gesture and I only coded it in the wrapping lines. So each one is the same degree, but gets tapered or narrowed towards the bottom. The lower leg is a cylinder moving at this angle, seen from above at that degree, and then will taper down as it gets towards the ankle. So even at this stage, right, this could be another exercise for wrapping lines where you just fill in your figure as a series of shapes and then practice your ellipses throughout. This back leg, I think, would be seen from above and then progressively gets more and more extreme towards the bottom. So I hope that helps clear up what is a common question, understandably, because it's a confusing concept. That's my 3 steps, how I'll always use or think through the problem of wrapping line. If that's too difficult, just remember arrow down, arrow up, then degree. These are 3 great exercises to help develop this familiarity with the ellipse at different angles or tilts. And then this is how I would apply it to a gesture to help advance that shape-based lay-in into something that can provoke a feeling of 3-dimensionality.